Hey everyone, this is Coding Heaven. Today we're gonna continue the game Pong. We're gonna try to finish it today. But if we can't finish it, we're probably gonna do most of the classes, and the next part we're gonna finish the code of inside the classes and more specifically the collision tests. The drawing and the updates, we're for sure gonna do them today. Okay, let's get started. Okay, the first thing I wanted to do is create an initialize method. This method is basically we're going to create this method is basically going to initialize all of the objects that we need. So of course we're going to initialize the paddles. Let's start with the ball because the ball uses the paddles, and then afterwards we're going to initialize the paddles. Okay, that's straightforward enough. And this is initialize both the paddles. Okay, and then after that, let's go to the run. Okay, now the game loop is very complicated. The game loop that I have is very complicated. It's a very popular game loop, so I'm just gonna copy paste it from a previous project. If you guys want me to, you can comment below, and I'll review this game loop in a very separate video, in a video all for itself. But for sake of like the fact that I don't have much time, I'm not gonna explain it. So create method update. We see we have two methods here that we did not create: update and draw. Every single graphics project or game you have to do, there is always a function update and there's always a function draw. Always, always, always. In the draw, of course, we want to initialize the drawing tools. We want to initialize the drawing tools. We also want to draw the background. We also want to draw the palettes, of course, the paddles, sorry. Paddles, and we also want to dispose. Dispose means actually draw. This basically draws on the graphics component, and this actually puts it on the screen. Update, we already know what's going to be in the update class. We're going to try to update the oh yeah, and for paddles too, we're going to store in the paddles class the score, so that's going to be really useful. And yeah, background, paddles, and score. Oh, we forgot the ball. We're going to draw ball. Okay, now next is the update. The update is very simple. We're going to update ball and update paddles. Just a comment for now, and okay, let's do this for now. Now we have this template, but we can't really do anything about it because all these things we need the paddle and ball class, except this. Now let's start with this. So this is gonna be a buffer. We're gonna create a buffer strategy. We're gonna create a buffer strategy that we're gonna take from the canvas, and with this buffer strategy we're gonna draw into it. Okay, so buffer strategy. Oh my god. Buffer strategy. Okay, buffer strategy. Let's call it buffer equals this dot get buffer strategy. Okay, let's import. Okay, wait, it's already imported. So in this buffer, we're gonna make sure that, because sometimes, well, most of the time in this dot get buffer strategy, when we receive it, we receive null. We receive nothing. We don't receive we receive an empty object. Why? Because the canvas doesn't have a buffer strategy yet. So we're gonna do an if buffer equals null. If buffer equals null, then we're gonna create a buffer. It's gonna be several lines of code. So this dot create buffer strategy, we're gonna put 3 for a triple buffer, and we're gonna return. just to get out of the method. Oh, sorry. When you do this, it's double equals. So just to get out of the method. Next, let's draw the background. Let's create a whole new function for drawing the background because it's not that simple. I forgot this. We have, of course, we have to create our graphics content. So buffer dot get graphics, get draw graphics. Okay, that's perfect. We did not import. We need to import graphics. Okay, now draw background does not exist, so we need to create a method draw background. Take this off. Now, how do we draw the background? Of course, we want a black. We want a black background. So how are we gonna do that? We're gonna do g.set color to color.black. Next, we're gonna do .g.fill rect. We're gonna fill a rectangle, the entire screen. So width, height. Afterwards, it's a bit harder to do a dotted line. Afterwards, we're gonna have to do a dotted line. This is a bit harder, but we'll get through it. Now we want a white dotted line, of course. So g.set color white. We're gonna have to create a graphics. We're gonna have to create a graphics 2D component to do this because a dotted line only exists in the 2D graphics. Let's import it. Control Shift O. Graphic. Let's call it G2D, and we're gonna cast our already made graphics to it. Graphics 2D. With this, we're gonna create also a dotted line class, and this, let's call it dashed. It's actually pretty complicated, so I'm just gonna copy it from a previous project. This basically means here. This is the only important part, to be honest. The rest are Control Shift O to get everything. The rest really are important. Just copy it from like an online source. This here, new float 10, it means that it's gonna go 10 pixels on, 10 pixels off, 10 pixels on, 10 pixels off, and you saw it in our previous project. Let's do this. See, it's 10 pixels on, 10 pixels off, 10 pixels on, 10 pixels off, 10 pixels on, 10 pixels off, and I see the suite. Okay. Now, now we have to draw our dashed line, of course. So g2d dot set stroke dashed and g2d dot draw line, and we want to draw our line from width divided by 2. We're gonna draw a line. Let's write it again. Oh no, not this. This here. That's the previous game. We want to draw the line from half of the width here, and so x equals width divided by 2, y equals 0, to x equals width divided by 2 to y equals height. So we're gonna do that. 0, again width divided by 2, and here is going to be height. Okay, perfect. Now we have the background ready. Let's dispose. Disposing is actually drawing, so we're going to do dg dot dispose and buffer dot show. We're going to show the buffer. Let's see what we got now. Black background, dotted line. Perfect. We're almost there. Okay, now the rest of the game is basically the classes, creating the classes. So let's do that. Let's start with the ball class. So let's go to the ball class. Oh. Okay, now the ball class. The ball class is very simple. Most of the code is collision test, which we're gonna do next. We're gonna do next time. So constructor. Okay, so what do we need for the ball class? Of course, we need a size. So public static final int size. Remember, it's always caps for a constant. Let's make it 16 pixels by 16 pixels. Size it's gonna be a square, so I don't need to create two constants. Okay, of course we're gonna make a private int x y for sure. We're gonna make the size public because it's a static final, so it's easy. So you might as well do it. You might as well make it public. Of course, we're gonna have a velocity, private int x velocity, private int x velocity, y velocity, and also we're gonna have a speed because the y velocity and x velocity, they have a value either 1 or -1, so they're going up or down. So we need a speed, private int speed. We need a speed to be able to make them actually move at a decent speed. So let's make that 5. We're gonna test it out later on to see which is the best. Okay, in the ball function, we want what do we want to do? We want to initialize the position of the positions of the ball, which is the center, and we also want to initialize the velocity of the ball, which is we want to make it a random number between 1 and -1. Either 1 or -1, I mean. Okay, so let's create that in its proprietary function. Okay. So now, first thing we want to do, what do we want to do? We want to initial position. Okay, this is easy. X equals game dot width divided by 2. Now there's a problem. When we draw a rectangle, the x position is usually the top left corner. Now if we want it to be centered, we can't just center the top left corner to the center. We need to center the center of the ball, which is going to be a square, weirdly enough, is going to have to be in the center of the screen. So we are going to subtract the size divided by 2. We're going to do the same exact thing for the y, but of course it's not width, it's going to be height, and it's going to be for the y. And then the initial velocities. How are we going to do this? We're going to do x velocity. Oh. What just happened? Oh, no, I didn't want to copy paste. Okay. It's x velocity equals, we need to create a sine function. I'm just going to copy paste them and then explain them. And then this sine function, let's create this sine function in the game class, because it's not a function that has anything to do with the ball. So we're gonna create a public int sine, and we're gonna take in a int. We're gonna take in an int, okay, and actually no, we're gonna take in a double just to make it more accessible. Okay, let's make it static too, because we're gonna use it either if there's a game class that's done or not. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is, if the number that's given is less or equal to 0, we're going to return -1. So it's basically the sign. So if I have -1, the sign of it is negative, so we're going to return -1. If I have -5, the sign is negative, we're going to return -1. If it's 0, we're going to return -1 too, because I don't want it to return 0. If it returns 0, my velocity is going to be 0, and I don't want that. And then if not, we're going to return 1. If not, we're gonna return 1. Okay, now this is simple enough function. Let's go back to the ball class. Now this basically this is a random number generated between 0 and 1. If you have a random number generated between 0 and 1, you multiply it by 2, of course it's going to be generated between 0 and 2. Now if we generate between 0 and 2, we subtract 1 is going to generate between negative 1 and 1. And that's exactly what I want. So now if it's a negative number, the velocity is going to be negative 1. If it's a positive number, the velocity is going to be positive 1. So it has equally amount of chance of being negative 1, positive 1. Well, about equally enough chance. It's significant, like the 0 is insignificant enough for it to not be equal enough chance. The same thing happens down here for the x velocity. Okay, that is basically the ball class. We're gonna do the collision tests next time. Let's actually make a few functions. Public void change. These functions are gonna be useful later on. So change y direction. Of course, if we want to change y direction, what we're gonna do is times equals negative 1, and we're gonna do the same exact function for the x direction. Okay, these are gonna be functions we're gonna use later on. If there's something that moves in your game, these functions are very useful. Or a function that changes the direction, or a proprietary function that changes the velocity, instead of having the velocity to be a public function, a public variable, I mean. Okay, of course. Okay. So now we created the ball class. Let's go to the palette. Let's go to the paddle class. It's gonna be very similar. We're gonna do the drawing and update just in just a bit. I'll show you a very simple way to understand it and do it. Okay, for the paddle class is about the same thing. It's very simple though. We're gonna have private int x and y, private velocity, of course, because the paddles only move in one direction, so there's only one velocity, and that is going to be an integer. It's going to be an integer. We're gonna have private int speed. We're gonna do that equal to 5, equal to 10 initially. Maybe that's a better type. We're gonna have private int width equals to 22, and height equals to 85. These are variables that I've already tested before. So I mean values that I've already tested before, and they work fine. Private score, of course, equals to 0. I mean the score is always gonna start at 0. Int. And the color, private color, Control-Shift-O to import color, and private boolean to know if it's the left paddle or the right paddle, because in the code it's very useful to know that. Okay, now for the paddle, what I want to do is I want to bring in a color C and a boolean left to know if it's left or not. Okay, so so here color equals C, of course. This dot left equals left. I'm adding this dot because they have the same name. So this dot basically means that in this class, this instance of the class that we're going to create in the game, I'm speaking of the variable here, not the one here. And when I say just left, I'm speaking of the one here. Okay, and it's also just to make it easier to understand. Now we need to initialize the position of the ball, of the pallets, I mean. So the x position is going to change depending if it's right or left, right? So we're going to start an if left. If it's left, then x equals 0, of course. If it's left, then it starts at the left. x equals 0. Else, if it is x equals game dot width minus the width of the palette, so it doesn't pass the screen, because remember the x position is from the top left corner. If we say it's game dot width, is going to be after the side, and we're never going to see it, so we need to subtract the width from it. And then there's y. The y is the same for all, game dot height divided by 2 minus height divided by 2. Draw function we're going to do later. Update function we're going to do it later. Let's create a few functions like we did for the ball class. Let's create a few functions that we're going to use later. Like for example, a function to add a point. Let's just call it add point. Very simple function. Is going to be score plus plus, and that's it. The function is done. How about another function? What we're going to do is this one is we're going to stop the palette. Actually, no, we're going to do those later because they're a bit more complicated to understand. Okay, now perfect. So we got the main template of the ball and paddle class ready. Now let's draw. This is the most important part. Okay, draw background, draw ball. So how we're going to draw the ball is we're going to call ball. Actually, oh, we need to initialize them first. True. Initialize ball. So ball equals new ball, and we didn't put any parameters for ball. Paddle 1 equals new paddle. We needed a color, so color dot the first paddle is going to be green, I believe. Color dot green, and we're also going to say this is the left one. Next one, paddle 2 equals new paddle color dot red, and this is not the left one. This is false. This is not the left one. Perfect. That's all. That's the initialization. That's already done. The initialization is very simple. Now let's go to the draw. Okay, go down to draw. Where's the draw? Okay, draw the ball. So ball dot draw G. Remember, we didn't create this function, but the simple way I was talking about is you just write this. See the squiggly line? Create method. There you go. Done. Done. It's very, very simple to do, and it's very, very useful. Here it's going to be very easy to do. The ball is always white. By the way, in the regular game, the ball is white. So we're just going to say color dot white, and also it's g dot fill rect x y, because our variables are x and y, like up in here. Width is going to be size, and height is going to be size. Easy enough. Run this. See, we got a ball in the center right there. Let's put the console down here. Okay, now let's do the same thing with the paddles. Okay, paddle dot draw. So it's going to be paddle 1 dot draw G, because we always need to give in the graphics content to draw, and paddle 2 dot draw G semicolon. Okay, now let's create the functions. Draw. As easy as that. Now, how do we draw the paddles? It's a bit more complicated to draw the paddles, because we also have to draw the score. So we draw paddle, draw score. The score we're actually gonna do that next time. It's way too it's a bit complicated, and I don't have much time. So set color dot actually we have a variable called color, which we initialized in the constructor. So just color, and g dot fill rect is gonna be x y width height, x y width height. Perfect. Now we have our paddles. Perfect. Okay. I think that's it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. I'm looking forward for part 3, where we're going to update the functions. We're going to update, make the collision tests, and if we have time, we're probably going to create the the key input class for it to know what we're clicking on the, and how to move the palettes, what we're clicking on the keyboard. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Have a good day.